Today we're going to talk about 6 things that no one tells you about when you start running. My name is Shona Hendricks, I'm from CoachPerry.com, and I'm going to hand over to Lindsay and he's going to give you the first one.
The first thing is that people don't tell you that you need to start slow. And what do I mean by that? It means that you need to build up really slowly in terms of the amount of running that you're doing. You also need to build up and transition from doing more walking and less running to slowly transitioning to doing less walking and more running. And very importantly, you need to start running very slowly. And a lot of people get that part wrong because they actually don't have their own central governor when they're starting out running. They don't know what it feels like, which is why once around the block leaves you completely exhausted and red in the face and wondering how anybody can call this fun. If you really slow it down and chuck in walk breaks, you'll actually be able to increase the volume of what you're doing at the start and then keeping that constant, slowly transitioning across from more walking to less walking and more running. What I want you to repeat to yourself to help you to keep it slow and easy and build up, and that is this, is that the slower you start out and build up, the more sustainable will be the change.
Another thing that no one really tells you when you start running is that to be a good runner, you shouldn't be running all the time, right? There's 2 aspects to this that we can look at. The first is that we really need to be focusing on recovery. We've covered a lot of this in many of our videos. And the second one is we shouldn't only be doing running all the time. So let's look at the recovery part. Is that a lot of people think, oh, well, you know, I want to get better and I want to run faster, so I'm going to run every single day. That's really the biggest mistake they're making, is that you only really get the benefit to what you're training and you're running when we are recovering. So you really need to ensure that we're not running all the time and that you're putting in some rest days and recovery days. The second aspect of that is you shouldn't only be running. In order to get better, we only have to be doing the activity of running. And so we can use other types of things of cross training to help us complement our running, which also ties in a little bit over the rest and recovery aspect, because you don't only just need rest and recovery, you can do other forms of recovery, something like active recovery, which is where cross training really comes in here. So things like cycling or swimming or rowing or elliptigo, any of those sorts of aspects where you are getting an aerobic benefit but not the compounding of running, is going to complement your aerobic capacity and in the long term your running performance as well.
So we're talking about strength training, and this is something that really falls by the wayside and no one tells you about because it's all about running. Now the strength training is absolutely key as an extra component to improve your running. I'm going to talk about 3 real factors and why strength training is important. Firstly, we talk about eccentric loading. Now, eccentric loading, if you imagine a running stride, every time you land or you have a foot strike on the floor, that pounding action is what we call an eccentric load. Now, your muscles have 2 types of contractions. You get a concentric load and an eccentric load. If you imagine my fingers as your muscle fibers, all right, a concentric load will be where the muscles come together, and that's usually your push off in your stride. Your muscles contract, so they pull together, and as you can imagine, there's more cross-sectional fibers in contact with each other in your muscles, so it allows for a much stronger contraction. The flip side to that is, as I mentioned, that foot strike, so the landing, where our muscle fiber lengthens, so there's less fibers in contact with each other. It's more of a vulnerable contraction, so we're at higher risk of getting injured in an eccentric contraction. With that, you'll often feel that that's why running downhill, for example, you'll feel that your quads are so sore for so long afterwards. You really take a battering with eccentric loading. It has an effect on your recovery, it has an effect on potential injury risk. The idea of strength training is to make sure that we can condition our bodies to be able to handle that eccentric loading a lot better, especially when you start putting hundreds and thousands of strides together in a race, whatever distance that race might be. Imagine every time you're landing on that foot, you're getting hit with a bat, for example. That's what it will start to feel like. Conditioning yourself to handle the eccentric loading is the first one. I touched on injury prevention with that. That then applies with strength training as a whole. We want to condition our body for the amount of volume, the amount of running that we are going to be taking on. So again, whether you are starting out to run your first 5K or you're running ultra marathons, your volume does increase in that training. You'll bring some intensity into that training, and it is absolutely important that we do get our body strong enough to be able to handle that. The strength also helps us keep ourselves, our posture and our running posture upright and a solid form. The third one is for performance gains. Strength training does help running performance, and it does that in two ways. Firstly, it helps you have a better, stronger base to push off from. So imagine running. Running is a very linear motion. You want to be moving your energy and your body weight and all that in a forward momentum. The stronger we are, the stronger our base is to be able to push that power forward and not necessarily slouching and losing energy in our running stride. So that's the first one. The second aspect as to why strength helps with performance is just the fact that you can put training blocks on top of training blocks, and it ties in with that injury prevention, that by not getting injured, you're not taking time off of running, so it allows you to keep training, keeps the consistency in the training, and helps improve your running performance going forward. If you're interested in downloading a free strength training plan that we've put together, you can click on the link on screen now.
Another thing no one tells you when you start running is that really time matters more than mileage. Right? Many people head out and go, okay, well, I'm going out for a 5K run or a 10K or a 15-mile run, and very often it's the actual time that matters more than the mileage that you're doing. Essentially, the body does not understand mileage. It doesn't understand racking up kilometers. It understands the time that it is being under a certain physiological strain or stress, and that is where you're getting the benefit from. And so that is why we prescribe our programs to time, as opposed to saying you need to hit this mileage in the week or this distance in the week or this distance in this particular session. This is also very effective because for the most part, runners love running, and so they're always going to try and chase that mileage. They're going to really try and get to, whatever kilometers or miles for the week. And very often what that does is it puts your body under your overload kind of stress and strain, because perhaps you're feeling a bit tired or stressed, and then you're really trying to chase to get that mileage and training for longer than you probably need to. If you're going out for a 1 hour run, you may do 9 kilometers in that run, you may do 10 kilometers in that run, depending on the day and where your body is at. But there's this inevitability as runners, we are all pretty competitive, is that you're going to try and get yourself to go faster every single time, because you're going to be chasing that mileage every time. Bet you've probably got a route that you know is a certain amount of miles, and you're going to try and do that route faster and faster and faster every single time. And so that's why don't go out and chase the mileage or the distance, particularly in that session. We're going out for the time, and the time that you're putting your body under that physiological load to get the benefit of that session. And so when you're pushing to go faster and faster and to get that distance in particular, as opposed to the time, you're then inevitably not doing your easy runs easy enough, because you're trying to get to a constant distance, to chase that distance and trying to push yourself faster and faster. And so you're losing the main focus of those easy and long runs. And again, the time under that physiological load is important. Rather building up blocks of hard sustained efforts in your interval sessions or your higher intensity sessions, as opposed to just aiming for distance in that session as well.
It's important to acknowledge that when we start out, it's often more mentally challenging than physically challenging. That is because at the start, you really do need to start out slow, as I emphasized at the beginning of the video. And in doing that, you can feel like you're not really doing anything, or you're not really getting anywhere. But that's only for the short period at the beginning. So you've just got to stay patient, accept that it's going to take a little bit longer. But in reality, it's only 6 to 8 weeks, and you're going to be in a position where you can run 5 kilometers without taking a walk break. And so although at the beginning it feels a little bit difficult, and it does feel a bit mentally challenging, and it's often hard to get yourself out of bed, stick with it. You'll feel your first major difference at about 3 weeks, and you'll feel a major difference at about 6 weeks.
Another thing no one talks about when you start running is how important nutrition is. I see this all the time when I'm running different races and I'm running them as training runs. I never see anyone else eating. and it blows my mind. I've either thought that they, hopefully have had breakfast. I'll stop and walk a little bit and have half a bar and then carry on running again. And I think people are always looking at me. Meanwhile, I'm looking at everyone else going, why is no one eating? And so I don't think we realize, or I don't think when you start running that you realize how important nutrition is. And so we have to give our body the fuel it needs for what we're asking it to do. And again, we have to refuel that afterwards of what the body has used, and we need to replenish that. Very often we see people going out for 3-hour training runs and not taking any source of fuel in. It doesn't necessarily need to be eating, but it needs to be some sort of fuel to give your body the energy that is required to do something like a long run or a higher intensity run. And then I've even seen this in ultra sort of marathons where people aren't eating and they're running out there for 6 hours. Think about if you're sitting at your desk for 6 hours at work or 8 hours workday. Do you not have anything to eat? You need to be giving your body the energy it requires, 1, to function, and then 2, to really get to the levels that we're asking it to do when we are running.
Glad you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to hit the like button on screen now. And if you want to learn how to start out right, hit the video you can see right now. Look forward to catching up again soon.